Hancock is a jazz keyboard player from Chicago. He started doing albums under his own name in the 60s. He was in a Miles Davis project that produced several albums in the late 60s, and he emerged out from that at the end of the 60s. That was a stable that Miles Davis had that seemed to produce some people who went on to do all sorts of interesting things. Mostly they went on to cross over from the jazz world into kind of more fusion stuff. And this is true for Herbie Hancock. He became known in the 70s and beyond as crossing over into more mainstream electronic stuff, pop, funk. He even had a hit single with a track called Rocket. He has got a typically large discography for a jazz musician. Hi, my name's Dan, and I couldn't possibly tell you what number album this was from Herbie Hancock, because he's been involved in so many different things that it's often quite hard to say for jazz musicians. I have heard this album before. I've heard it a couple of times before. So let's give a little bit of history of my reviewing. So at the moment, I'm in this list that I'm trying to review of the 3,000 greatest albums of all time, according to Acclaim Music. Before this, I was working off a list that I had done myself, which I'd amalgamated from various sources, and I had produced as a list of 1,000 albums. And I got through to about 450 before I found this list, and then abandoned my list because this list is so much better than that. So in that phase, I was doing it as a blog. And then the previous before that, I actually had a period of reviewing when I was doing... all I was doing was putting my reviews onto Facebook for my Facebook friends to see, and the focus of that was progressive rock. And during that, I actually put all that stuff together and made an electronic book, a PDF of my reviews and some other background stuff about progressive rock. So this album I reviewed back in that phase, in the progressive rock phase. It's not, I wouldn't call it progressive rock, but it's at the edges of that. So it's avant-garde jazz. I would kind of say that it does cross over a little bit into kind of fusion, but not a huge amount. So we've got a sextet here. We've got Herbie Hancock on electric piano. We've got a bass and drums, and then we've got three guys playing various brass and woodwind instruments between them. I couldn't possibly tell you exactly who was playing what, where, when. There are 3 tracks. They're all instrumentals, and they're all fairly long. The longest is the third one, which is called Wandering Spirit Song, which is 20 minutes plus. The first track is called Ostinato, and it's got, I think it's alternating bars of 8/8 and 7/8, or you could think of it as being 15/8, but also I'm not sure they kind of really thought of it like that just because of the way the music is, that they necessarily thought of it in bars in the same way. It has this repeated bass line through it that goes through the whole thing like this, which then the other instruments play off. So between the bass and the drums, it's actually the bass that provides the structure here for this. And in some ways, this is reminiscent of Miles Davis stuff from the same time or a little bit earlier. But also, I felt like it harked across to... So for a while, I listened to some Afrobeat stuff by a guy called Fela Kuti, which tended to have this long repeating thing that then other people kind of play over the top of. And there are other styles of music that do that and have done it since. So going a bit later into the 90s, you started to get this kind of approach taken for rave and pop and stuff like that. So anyway, yes, ostinato, there's about 13 minutes of that. The second track is You'll Know When You Get There, which is 10 minutes long. It's quite mellow, and it's based around some electric piano chords. But other than that, it's quite free, and it moves along. Okay. Wandering Spirit Song is the third track, which is the longest, as I've said. It's not a song. It's an instrumental. They're all instrumentals. It does, however, wander very much so, quite seemingly aimlessly, but there may be some instructions of structure here. There are coordinated bits in it, but there are also bits that you could think of as being almost as pure free jazz as I've heard, in the sense that you've got everybody playing at once and they're playing something different and they're deliberately not connected with what anyone else is doing. And so the result is chaos, basically, but it's deliberate chaos. So when harking back to when I reviewed this before, and I have looked up my review from then, I didn't hugely respond to it at that point. I think this time around I've enjoyed it more. I'm not really sure why that is, whether that's just because of the few years intervening, I've listened to more stuff of this style and maybe I've got a better ear in. It might be because at the time I was listening to a lot of prog, and I really like a lot of prog, and maybe in comparison I didn't like it as much, and now I'm listening to much more mainstream stuff, and so maybe I responded better to it as a result. Don't know. Hard to tell, but I did kind of like it somewhat. To a reasonable extent. It also got me thinking about instructions to bands, because obviously, I mean, I have kind of this observation that I've had when I've been listening to stuff that's been labelled as avant-garde or free jazz, that I usually can find at least a little kind of kernel of structure in there. I'm wondering how far can you go? How much can you get into a situation where there really is no structure at all? And I was wondering what kind of instructions might be given here. Now, I've actually been in a situation where I have played music in groups of people with other instrumentalists and have been given instructions to them. And I've never really thought of approaching this in saying, as an instruction, I'm not going to give you kind of musical instructions. I'm going to give you instructions about the feeling that I want to get across, and then see how you interpret that and see what comes over. And I'm wondering if that's kind of how this has been approached, because there's definite kind of, the three tracks have different feels to them, despite the fact that they're very free and open, or some bits of it are. So, note for myself, I'm going to try that sometime with some people and to say, I want to make it feel like this. I'm not expecting it to become free jazz, but I want to see how they approach that and how they play. So it'll be interesting. Anyway, putting that aside, given the fact that I didn't like it so much first time round, I've liked it more this time round. Maybe I need to leave it a couple of years and then come back again and see if it's grown on me even more in between. So, maybe it will. Anyway, I quite liked it. I possibly would go back and choose to listen to it again. That's what I think of this album. I'd love to know what you think, so please do talk to me through the comments box. Don't be shy. That's it from me for now.